Here at 6, just days away from a new ban on hemp products that act like marijuana, Secretary of State Jay Ashcroft's office rejected the rule that would have enforced the ban. Tonight, Joe McLean reports Governor Parson is calling out his fellow Republicans, saying that the move puts children at risk.
The executive order restricts the sale of any food or drinks infused with hemp that mimics the effects of weed. Delta 8 and Delta 10 THC are some of the most common forms. On Thursday, Governor Mike Parson slammed the Secretary of State's office for blocking his emergency rule set to take effect September 1st.
I don't even understand that. We're talking about protecting children from a cannabis substance or fentanyl or any other kind of product that we have no idea what's in these packages, and they're targeting children.
Parson said the rule is aimed at eliminating an unregulated drug product from store shelves, saying with no independent testing requirements, these weed-like hemp products are just not safe, particularly those with packaging meant to appear like name-brand candies or snacks.
But they're targeting our kids, and not to do something when we've had a 600% increase in children going into emergency rooms is something we got to take action in.
But that 600% increase Parson mentions actually includes all kinds of cannabis, much of which became medically legal in 2018 and recreationally legal in 2021. The real public health impact of hemp THC products in Missouri is unclear. The Secretary of State's office wasn't available for an interview today, but a spokesperson tells me the governor's office failed to prove these products actually create an emergency. Also, going through the emergency rule process cuts off the opportunity for public comment on the rule. Without the emergency status, though, Parson's executive order will likely take months instead of days to take effect. In Jefferson City, Joe McLean, KY3 News.